But
Yeah.
anyway, welcome to the AMA with Coorest. We have some nice topics to discuss today. I will be joined by Florian, Martin, and Nick. Nick is the CEO from Coorest, so it will be some nice time. And I think let's start with giving everyone the permission to talk. I think that's a great start. Hello, Igor. Hello, Trami.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So, welcome, Nick. I think Martin and Florian already were many times on community calls. Now we have AMA with you from Coorest. So I would just say, let's start with a small introduction, like 1 minute. Who are you? And let's start with you, Nick.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Nick, the founder and CEO of Coorest. My background is not in tech, actually. Before I founded the company, I was actually in the army for 17 years. I'm actually a retired army captain from the Dutch army. I spent my adult life in being deployed in the Middle East and in Africa, to be honest, before I went into tech. And in 2021, I founded the company Coorest that has a mission that is to bring real-world trees to the blockchain as NFTs to generate CO2 tokens that can be seen as an upgraded version of carbon credits. And we are really focused on bringing a new asset class based on real-world trees to the blockchain. That's basically a long story short.
Thank you, Nick. Captain. A great background story, actually, that you came from the army into tech. It's interesting. I think we can deep dive into this more after everyone made a little introduction. So, Martin, you're the next one.
Sure. Hey, hi everyone. Great to have Coorest here in the AMA. First of all, really appreciate that you guys are coming on stage. Obviously excited to have Coorest deployed on Q. Myself, my name is Martin. I'm one of the co-initiators from Q. So I've been with the project from the very beginning. Background in finance, also not in tech directly, although I've worked mainly on tech projects while in finance as a consultant, later as a CFO. I think many of you probably know me already from previous sessions, so I'm going to keep it short and hand it over to Florian.
Yeah, guys, happy to be here. Happy to have you, Nick, from Coorest. Very interesting project, what you outlined already. My background is from engineering, actually. I was an automotive car parts engineer before coming to crypto. So, I enjoy the technical discussions a lot. I enjoy the solutions that we have with blockchain and how to combine this with such, very important topics as, for example, CO2, carbon footprint, neutralization, these kind of things. So, very happy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So I think that was a great introduction of everyone. So I have a personal question for you, Nick. It's about the history of Coorest. So as far as I know now, you live in the Netherlands, and maybe I'm not such an informed German, but as far as I know, a lot of the Netherlands is below sea level. So my question is for you, how you came up with the idea of Coorest, and does anything like the sea level influenced your idea, because you actually live in the Netherlands, right?
Correct. Yeah, I live actually in Rotterdam, and this is an area well known for creating land out of the sea. So where I grew up, I was actually a witness of the creation of new parts of the harbor in Rotterdam that were created literally out of the sea. And it's not so much connected to the idea of Coorest, but it is interesting to see that in Holland we are heavily focused on sustainability and on farming, and now also more and more on CO2 reduction, because Holland is, I think, one of the leading countries within the EU, or maybe even globally, to set policies regarding this CO2 reduction and compensation. Maybe a short side note here, because in Holland, starting this year, the 1st of July, all companies with over 100 plus employees, they have to start reporting all their CO2 emissions. And that in Holland alone, that's 8,000 plus companies, right? So that is going to be very impactful. And then on 2024 and 2025, companies have to come up with the policy not only to report emissions, but also to start reducing and compensating the emissions they have in their operational process and their supply chain. But coming back to how did I come up with the idea of Coorest? It was actually during my time after I exited the army that I started deep diving into tech, and it started with me personally investing in crypto. And the moment I started deep diving into Ethereum, I decided, okay, I need to do something with my inability to read code. So I did some courses, some Solidity courses, to be at least able to understand, okay, what is a smart contract? What does it look like? How do I interact with it on Etherscan, on Polygon Scan, etc. And then I started part-time working for another crypto company that tokenizes precious metals. And then after a year or so, during the lockdowns, I was walking outside, and then I had this idea of, hey, I think we are now getting closer to moving real world assets on chain, instead of only having crypto native assets that have no link to the real world. I came up with this concept of bringing real world trees to the blockchain. And then in April 2020, I wrote the first white paper outlining the concept of NF3s, CO2 tokens, and proof of carbon compensation certificates. That was basically the start of a journey of going into hackathons, finding developers to see if we could come up with an MVP. At that time, that was in 2021, Polygon was also an up-and-coming ecosystem. So we reached out to them to see if they liked it, and they said yes, and they helped us with some micro grants to get it off the ground, basically. We realized, like, hey, that people find it interesting, but the main use case is basically outside of crypto. So we started investigating, like, hey, this whole carbon credit space, what does it look like? And we discovered that the traditional carbon credits is all Web 2.0, and it has some significant flaws, which made me decide, like, hey, we really have something here, because we are solving some big issues, potentially big issues related to the transparency and accountability of carbon compensation claims. That is basically the underlying issues that we're trying to solve, which led up to the creation of Coorest.
Okay, great. That's an interesting story. I'm still fascinating about the aspects that you come from the army and dive into tech, and now you're building this CO2 project, Coorest, and it's interesting, you know. So you just gave a little heads up to the story of Coorest So what is the actual problem that Coorest is solving?
Yeah, that's a couple of problems that we're solving. I know the carbon markets can be quite a niche market for people, but this market is growing quite rapidly, and people that have been following the carbon markets have seen some recent articles that came to light that many carbon credits are basically unbacked, right? So people don't really know if carbon credits are linked to actual forest or forestry projects. Because how do you prove that a carbon credit is backed, right? Because now, if you look at the process of how a carbon credit is created, sold, traded, and retired to generate a carbon neutrality claim, it's really opaque. So that the first issue is, okay, how do you prove that the carbon credit is backed? That's a problem we saw that needs to be addressed. Then the barrier to entry for both supply and demand is really high. So if you're a farmer or a green project that is planting trees and you want to sell your carbon credits, you have to go to centralized entities, carbon registries, to get audited and then issued carbon credits. It's a lengthy process and it's very expensive. So it's not easy for small and medium-sized farmers, for example, from developing countries, to enter the market and sell their sequestered carbon. So we removed that barrier to entry. Another one is the double counting and double claiming issues that are now in the market, because carbon credits can literally just be registered in Excel sheets. And the trading happens on a very hard to access market through brokers. And the retirement of carbon credits is also very opaque, which is handled by brokers and with registries. And that is literally a chain of people calling each other and then managing the credits and retirement of those in Excel sheets. Which is very prone to mistakes, which happened recently and came to light. And The Guardian wrote some articles about that. Last week, Delta Airlines was sued. They now have a class action lawsuit because of their carbon neutrality claims. And in the past, Shell and I think also KLM Airlines ran into some issues because of their carbon neutrality claims, because it's a highly unregulated market, the voluntary carbon market. So there's a lot of companies out there that try to sell all kinds of carbon credits that are basically unverifiable. All right, so you have to trust middlemen basically to buy those credits without having any guarantee that they're actually backed.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Nick. So, Martin, maybe since you have some background and some experience, how big is the market demand for carbon offsetting solutions from your side?
Yeah, so my answer, I think is really first of all, just subjectively, I think it's huge. I mean, from just as a consumer, realizing where voluntary offsetting now is popping up, also as someone running a company, of course, it's an issue that's coming up more frequently. We see it when we travel by airline, when we travel by train, and so on. You get the opportunity, the possibility to offset your carbon footprint within the ordering or booking process now in many ways, or in many instances already. I mean, in terms of numbers, I just looked it up, being a numbers guy. And Nick, correct me if I'm completely off here, but the voluntary market, from what I understand alone today, is worth 3 billion already, and of course going fast, probably increasing something like 5-fold over the next few years. But then, as Nick already explained, I think, of course, the compliance aspect that's now being implemented in many jurisdictions around the world, that's going to probably multiply the market size by orders of magnitude what compared to what we have today. So it's fascinating also, I mean, hearing the story of how those assets are traded, and the opaque way. I mean, that reminds me of many ways in which some of the big bookkeeping is done for other asset classes still today, basically Excel sheets, which I think in the age of blockchain is not how it should be. So I think, as the market grows, transparency is badly needed and will hopefully also be demanded by consumers and companies alike. So I think this is a really huge and cool and growing market, especially if that's moving to the blockchain, that's the right way.
Yeah. As you said, the market is 3 billion big, and as also Nick said, there is a lot of, so you have to trust middlemen. So there's actually a good purpose for blockchain technology, and I think Florian is our tech guy. He can say more about why blockchain technology is relevant for this market.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we started to bash here on Excel sheets, let me continue with that. No, just kidding. What I really see as a big benefit, and speaking a bit of my recent experience and work, so we have discussions with other projects that are building incentive schemes for good behavior, and this also includes carbon footprint offset. And just by talking about this app, it was clear that using public permissionless blockchain, it's very easy to integrate a solution like Coorest natively into other applications such this essentially mobile phone app, which incentivize good behavior. So by making this information about really CO2-backed carbon credits available on a public ledger, such a blockchain, and it can be a Polygon blockchain, it can be Ethereum blockchain, it can be Q blockchain. We can talk about this later, how the multi-chain plays a role here. But for me, most importantly, it's public, it's trust, it's permissionless innovation. And there will be so many apps in the future that can make use of these that we cannot imagine the effects coming from this free innovation. That's why I'm really excited about this, and why I think let alone this public nature of the blockchain can bring a lot of traction here. And then I think one other aspect is the immutability next to the public nature. So we all know an Excel sheet is you make a mistake, you click undo, or you save a wrong version, and so on and so forth. Nick mentioned that these agencies make errors. Errors can happen on the blockchain too, but at least you can understand the history, how it came to that error, and how you can correct that error, and it cannot be arbitrarily changed. I think that's also a big portion of the trust that comes with the immutability of chains, which is trust is a very important topic when we talk about CO2 offset, right? Because if you pay a few dollars to pay off or to compensate for your trip to the USA or whatever, you want to make sure that's really the case. And blockchain allows for it. And and maybe lastly, the public nature again, not only for apps like I mentioned before, but also for the corporate sector. There are many ERP systems which are interconnected to each other that are very specifically designed, and the interoperability is a big problem. And I think once we have established solutions on blockchain, even the corporate sector can start to integrate these solutions one by one, project by project, and a standard will emerge. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of interoperability problems will be solved by this. So as I'm a technology fan, I see a lot of chances and opportunities here.
Yeah. In summary, good things take time, Florian?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can't pressure something out. It takes some time. So yeah, today is all about Coorest, and let's get back to Nick. So Nick, the Coorest ecosystem is wide and exciting, and you already mentioned something about trees and CO2 certificate. Can you go more in detail? What is this NFT tree? CCO2 token, proof of carbon compensation certificate, and so on. Can give us a little heads up, take your time. I think it will be an interesting topic to know.
Yeah, so we introduced an ecosystem of tokens that is a mix of NFTs and ERC20 tokens to take care of the CO2 accounting, basically. Because the most important thing that makes us different than, for example, carbon credits or tokenized carbon credits is that we take the actual unit that generates the carbon credit on chain. So that is the tree. Because we think that it's not only interesting to tokenize the carbon, but to make the tree an investable asset class by tokenizing it. So we started with a tree that is actually a fruit-bearing tree that gives a user or an investor the opportunity to invest in and then gets exposure to the yield of the CO2 captured by the tree, but also of the fruit that it produces. And we introduced another NFT that is connected to a piece of forest that only yields CO2. This is what we did in-house because we actually planted and we own 17 hectares that we planted ourselves as a proof of concept last year and this year. And that NFT generates CO2 tokens based on the real world CO2 absorption of that particular green asset. And a CO2 token is a representation of 1 kilogram of absorbed CO2 that is released or claimed by the NFT holder over time. So at the moment that a tree is planted, it starts absorbing CO2 and we translate that into tokens. Sorry. So the NFT then is just like any other NFT that is sitting in the wallet, and people then go to our dApp and they can claim the CO2 tokens. But when they claim, something is happening in the background that makes it that gives reassurance to the CO2 token, because we partnered with Chainlink last year to bring satellite data on chain to mint CO2 tokens. And what we actually did is we modeled our CO2 token contract after True USD stablecoin contract to implement Chainlink and Chainlink proof of reserves. But instead of connecting it to a bank account, we connected to satellite data in order to mint CO2 tokens. We have a satellite data partner that aggregates, in this case, biomass data to check all tree planting projects that we either do in-house or that we onboard from other projects globally. And that is a biomass check indicating, okay, those trees are there and they keep being there from the moment of onboarding. And we put that on chain once a month. So yesterday I made an Oracle call for all projects, requesting the status of the project, and that is then used to validate the CO2 token minting. So when people claim the CO2 tokens, then it's just like an ERC20. It sits in your wallet, and then it's up to the user what they can do with those tokens. So it's tradable if they want. or they can burn those CO2 tokens to generate what we call proof of carbon compensation certificates. And by burning that CO2 token, you actually get an NFT in return that holds data about who compensated what amount, for what reason, and of course when. And that's all managed in our decentralized app. Then people receive a PDF or a QR code linked to that NFT. Because the NFT, it's everything happens on the blockchain, but introduced a human readable layer to that, so people can show it on the social media, or they can print a QR and connect it to a product. So when people scan that QR code, they actually have a link to the NFT with the immutable data on, in this case, Polygon scan, where they can see the compensation event. So that is basically the core ecosystem that we have built. And right now we are working with the Chainlink and our satellite data provider to add another data layer to it for CO2 absorption. So it will not only be biomass, but it will be actual CO2 absorption data aggregated through satellites that will indicate the amount of CO2 that is on chain. So you can compare that basically to a stable coin or to a commodity-backed coin that uses Chainlink proof of reserves, that is doing a check if you're not over minting compared to the real world assets. So you can imagine if you look at the gold-backed stablecoin that uses Chainlink proof of reserves, then that goes through an API that's connected to a vault that indicates, okay, you have like 2 kilos that entered the vault, and therefore you can mint 2 kilos worth of gold-backed tokens. And we are working on doing that with CO2 data. So in the minting functionality, you will have basically a 2-step verification. That's first the biomass check, and then later the CO2 absorption check, which is not really easy, because you can imagine that if you look at commodities or a bank account, that is something that is quite static, and CO2 absorption is it fluctuates, right? So because you have seasonality that influence the CO2 absorption, because when you measure a tree in spring and summer, the CO2 absorption is higher than in the winter, for example, but it also differs throughout the world. And yeah, we are trying to come up with an average with the safety threshold and deviation in order to mint the tokens, right? So because the smart contract needs a formula for minting tokens, and we are now working on connecting that to real world data in order to show, hey, this is really backed by absorbed CO2. It's quite technical, to be honest, but that's basically what we are doing.
Great, Nick. I have a small question. Since you plant this tree, and some people are really excited about this topic of planting trees and the whole CO2 stuff, can you actually visit the tree, and what kind of tree is it? Just a random question, you know?
Yeah. That is possible. Because I'm actually sitting in Spain now, 5 minutes away from where we planted, because we own 17 hectares in the north of Spain, close to a small farmer village called Caspe. And the first 6 hectares was planted with fig trees, were planted last year. People that follow our socials can see pictures or videos of me visiting the land and the trees. And not too far from here, it's like 30 minutes drive, we planted a regular forest. We acquired almost 12 hectares of land there that used to be an old almond farm. And yeah, we replanted it basically with native pines and oaks and sabinas to make it a native forest again. So yeah, it's possible to visit because we own the land as a company. And we had visitors last year when we started the project. So the people that bought NF3s, a small group of people came by to see the land and learn more about the project.
I honestly think this is great because you build this forest up, and maybe in the future you can give also some service to people, to show the impact of nature on the region. And when you build those forests up, it's great. I love it.
Yeah, that was actually one of the ideas we had, like what additional benefits can we offer to people, because the land here is actually, it's super nice and it has a great view over a lake. And yeah, there's enough space left to organize cool events or even a weekend camping, So because I like to be there on the land, I do a barbecue there regularly. And it's definitely something we just explored, like, hey, how can we make this more like a community place?
Yeah, definitely. The humans forgot, unlearned the connection to nature, when I can say it like that. So it's a great option for school classes and so on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of options also for the future for your place and the forest and your idea and barbecues and camping and so on. But you previously mentioned Chainlink, and they have a build program. And why is it relevant for Coorest, Nick?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's relevant to us to work closely together with Chainlink because we are a project that is connected to real world assets, and therefore our smart contracts, they need access to information or data outside of the blockchain. And as the name Chainlink already says it, so we use them to link other data sources to our smart contracts in order to mint tokens. So otherwise, it would not be possible for us to prove that tokens are really backed. That's how we utilize their infrastructure. And for people that follow Chainlink closely, they have all kinds of ways to basically prove that your token is backed. So right now, we are utilizing a Chainlink Oracle, but soon that will be added with Chainlink Proof of Reserves, and they are rolling out Chainlink functions where you can more easily integrate data to your smart contracts through Chainlink API functions. Because a Chainlink Oracle is not easy to set up and maintain, and this API functions basically allows you to do that more easily, because we foresee a growth in data sources that will become available in order to create real world use cases on chain. And therefore that Chainlink relationship is very important to us.
Yeah, great. So, as you know, Nick, as we all know, I think Q is about governance. It's the main topic. One of the main topics at Q, the governance, the root nodes, and the constitution, of course. And we have our AMA now. So my question would be, which role does governance play for Coorest now and in the future?
Yeah, so right now, because we are just at our second year of existence, governance is still quite centralized. Because we are dealing with real world assets, it's kind of hard to start as a DAO. But we foresee in the near future that we want to become a DAO. But also because we are dealing with real world use case where we enable companies to utilize our tokens for carbon compensation, we foresee the need for governance and dispute resolution. And the best way to explain it is to use an example. So the European Union is introducing CO2 tariffs in 2026, basically enforcing companies that export products to the EU to do something with their CO2 emissions, right? Otherwise, you might not be able to export to the EU, and therefore we think that our tokens and certificates will become a potential tool for companies to show to regulators that they compensated their emissions. And therefore, we foresee the need of a governance structure that has a dispute resolution mechanism that Q has introduced. Because you can imagine if a company is exporting to the EU and maybe a regulator says, "Yeah, we don't believe you," or "Yeah, you have generated this certificate. How do we know that it's really true that you compensated or you reduced your emissions in your supply chain," which can result in a dispute. And therefore, we think it's important that our ecosystem, not just us as a company, but our entire ecosystem, has a mechanism to resolve these disputes. And I've already been talking to projects that we are onboarding now from China, and China is the largest producer of goods that are exported to the EU. And this could become relevant, right? So exporting cars or steel or whatever, many times that can result in issues. And then, where do you go, right? So, and then something like the International Chamber of Commerce could become very relevant.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the small insight, for the big, small, mediocre, how you want to call it, insight into the governance topic at Coorest. I think let's dive again, when we already have this topic on the table, a little bit back to Q for a second. And Martin, what governance modules does Q blockchain provide for DApps in general, and how can they help with it?
Yeah, I think actually the example that Nick has given is really very good and shows what DApps or companies, protocols, products that are building on Q can do, and how they can use Q's governance capabilities. So maybe on a little more abstract level, I think there are three elements. First is rule setting. So if you have any business models that have slightly more complex rules that cannot be fully coded in smart contracts, then Q as a protocol has the capability to integrate constitutions that DAOs or companies give themselves. So we are working with a team currently on standard constitutions that hopefully fit a large number of use cases and DAOs that DAOs or companies will be able to apply, adapt to their needs, and then basically have enforced by Q. And that enforcement, I think, is the second aspect where Q as a protocol can support. So the question is always, if you have a rule set, how are the rules enforced? And that can be done on Q, for example, with the help of so-called root nodes, which can get veto rights, which are an independent entity or panel that has the role of enforcing the rules that the communities that build on Q agree on. And then thirdly, also mentioned by Nick, dispute resolution. So if there are disagreements, if there are problems that are popping up, which sooner or later they will inevitably, then it's really helpful or necessary to have a process how those disputes are resolved. And Q as a protocol has an integrated mechanism how that can be done. Currently, the ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, is integrated as an arbitration court. That's the world's largest arbitration court. So you have that within the protocol. You don't need to go outside of the protocol and go to local courts, which is always very always unclear. If you're dealing with local courts, you don't know what the jurisdictions are locally and so on. You don't know how to deal with them. But with Q, you have the opportunity to do that all within the protocol. As I said, the ICC is currently already integrated, we are working on integrating more options for dispute resolution for specific use cases that cater to whatever the types of disputes that arise are. So just summing up again, I think 3 elements: rule setting, dispute resolution, and enforcement. Those are the basic 3 basic elements of good governance, and on all 3 of those, Q as a protocol can provide support.
Great. Thank you for the insight. Florian, which of these models are interesting for Coorest as an example scenario would be great?
Yeah, I think examples will help. I try to come up with examples which are in Web3. Easily understandable. So what we can think of governance scenarios where Q can support is, let's imagine there is a Coorest DAO, and Nick, you start with a very centralized governance, and then later it becomes decentralized. So there is at some point a DAO constitution which essentially defines the rules under which any funds of the treasury can be spent. And then you have on blockchain, you have the typical problems that the majority of the DAO can decide what's right, and that is sometimes not in the interest of the project identity. So for example, if it's decided in the treasury a certain amount can only be spent on, let's say, forest plantation. Yeah, but then the DAO makes the treasury decision to spend a certain fraction of the treasury on sports car NFTs because they're at the moment hyping and there is a potential to make money, which could help the project as well. There could be a conflict of the majority thinking it's good to make money in speculating on sports car NFTs, but actually there is a sustainability criteria on spending this. So the governance decision can be confirmed by the majority vote, but is against the constitution of the DAO. And in this case, it's very vital to have checks and balances integrated. And this is what we put on Q with a lot of effort. There can be a first check and balance provided by a DAO board, which is elected, but maybe the DAO board can get compromised because there are still members of the DAO itself. And then there are ways to escalate these decisions. So let's say there is a veto by the DAO board not coming, even though it's against the DAO constitution. How can I escalate this? And maybe I can escalate it into an on-chain dispute resolution protocol or another veto power. For example, there on the Q blockchain, we have the concept of expert panels, which are governed by the Q token holder. So they are neutral to any particular DAO, but governed by the Q token holders, and they can take over actions to manage DAOs, decision for DAOs. So we have these organs, and then we have other DAO external organs such as the root nodes, which can also act veto power on the decisions. But the idea behind is that not there is something that governs the DAO. It's just a check and balance. So it just to make sure there is no abuse and it's not against the constitution of the DAO, such a check and balance can be integrated. And we call this really sophisticated governance. We want to define a standard governance for DAO. We want to set the standard governance for DAOs in Web3. And this is an example how Coorest DAO in the future could have a few of these elements integrated.
Great. A lot of information in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
Yeah. It's all overall. That's a huge topic, Nick, what would be the difference between carbon credits and CCO2 token?
Yeah, that is a good question, because the carbon credit is basically a unit of account for CO2 emissions that mainly lives in Web2 environments. Right now, you also have projects that tokenize existing carbon credits. So you have a tokenized version of that on chain. And the biggest difference between the carbon credit and the Coorest CO2 token is that we only exist on chain. There's nothing outside of the blockchain. And we have integrated what they call MRV data, measurement, registration, verification data, directly into our smart contracts. That's the biggest difference. And then our unit of account is 1 kilogram, and the unit of account for carbon credit is a ton, because we think that it doesn't really matter if it's tokenized, right? If it's a ton or a kilo, but we already see a trend where the measurement of CO2 footprints is done in kilograms on consumer level. And therefore we said, okay, we create a unit of account of 1 kilogram. And another difference is that we created a fungible token. So we didn't create project-specific carbon tokens, because we believe in the power of fungibility. And that is enabled through the Coorest Carbon Standard, which we introduced and got certified last year. That focuses on a few things, and that is additionality. So only newly planted trees. We don't tokenize existing forest. We only tokenize newly planted trees. Other criteria in the standard are, okay, you have to respect biodiversity. You cannot introduce non-native species. And any tree can be onboarded. It doesn't really matter if it's a fruit-bearing tree. But the most important thing is that you comply with those criteria I just mentioned. And therefore, because of that standard, we can let farmers and tree planting projects generate the same fungible token. So you have no competition between carbon tokens, because you can see that sometimes that a carbon project in Belize has a different price than a carbon project from Africa. And we think that, okay, if you comply with the standard, you should be able to generate the same token. And by generating this fungible token, we are able to build other products on top of that. So, for example, we are now co-developing an insurance product for NF trees. So a farmer will be able to insure the trees against flood, fire, storm, because in the end of the day, it's a real world asset that is exposed to real world risks. And if the tree is destroyed, then that CO2 linked to that tree is also useless. And therefore we are co-developing this insurance product with EtherRisk, allowing to buy an insurance product and pay a premium also in CO2 tokens. So you can imagine if you're onboarding a project in Kenya, for example, and that project is hit by a fire or a flood or a storm, and the large part of the trees are destroyed, then basically the tokens connected to that project should be reversed or are useless. And in order to fix that, we want to introduce that insurance product where tokens are allocated to a risk pool. So if an event like that happens, we can compensate or reverse that amount by either burning CO2 tokens or pooling tokens from that pool and allocate it to people that lost CO2 tokens, because you have a fungible token. So it means that it doesn't really matter. It's very interchangeable. And doing that creates a more secure market. And we can build other follow-up products on top of that as well, like futures, spot future contracts for CO2 tokens, etc. That's the main difference.
Do you have a little bit more time, Nick? Because there are 2 questions from the
Yes, I do.
community.
Yes, I do.
Okay. The first question would be from Sabrina. What is the difference between Coorest and companies that tokenize carbon credits?
So we are not tied to traditional registry. We have our own registry, we have our own standard, and we have our own registry. And we don't bridge, so there's no bridge going from Web 2 to Web 3. It's all Web 3 native. And we are decentralized on project level, meaning so we are not the custodian of the tokens that from projects that we onboard. So when we onboard a farmer or green project, they claim their own CO2 tokens. So we don't. We are not a centralized entity controlling the token supply. I think those are the most important differences.
Okay. And Igor asked about if you need professional validators and if you already heard something about green energy on blockchain.
Yeah, I've seen many initiatives related to green energy. We didn't really have time yet to dive into that topic because we are now purely based or focused on what we call nature-based solutions. So for us, tree planting and onboarding of tree planting initiatives. But we also see combinations where they plant trees and they also install solar panels. So that could be an interesting mix. We also explored installation of solar panels on our own land that we own. But yeah, we are only a small startup, so we need to focus. But it's definitely something that we have on our radars. Like we know it exists, and potential synergies could definitely be possible. I also see he has 2 other questions.
Yeah, one question would be: are you working with proof of work mining services, as some have still a high carbon emission, but actually Coorest is proof of stake, right?
Yeah, we are deployed on Polygon. That's proof of stake.
Yeah.
And that is automatically linked to Ethereum, which is also proof of stake.
Yeah, great. So I think we came to the end. For the people who are actually listening to this call, because I think it's like some people, and there is definitely interest from some. Where can they learn more about Coorest and the whole vision, Nick?
So on our website, there's a lot of documentation available that explains how the Coorest Carbon Standard is built. There's also links to the Coorest Carbon Standard registry where you can see all the onboarded projects. You can go via our website to our DApp, and there's a DApp manual to see how this all works, with links to all the smart contracts, to the oracles. That is all documented. And then if you have more in-depth questions, you can go into mainly our Discord to interact with us directly. We have some people that came through our Discord to become like onboarding partners that help us find projects that can become onboarded by us. So yeah, the best way to read about it is via the website, documentation and links to the documentation. And for other in-depth questions, it's better to go into our Discord channel.
Great, because you just mentioned Discord, I just posted for the lazy ones, Nick, the Coorest website and the Discord link into the stage channel chat. So you just have to click join the Coorest server, get to know more about Nick, Coorest, and the whole team and the vision behind it. And I think we came to the end, Nick. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much for hosting us. It's good to tap into the community of Q.
Yeah, of course. I think there are some people who are actually interested. So give us a little heads up if some people came over to the Coorest and asked some questions. That would be great. Okay. I think let's say goodbye, everyone. And see you next time.
All right. See you in Discord.
Yeah, see you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks very much to Nick for coming to our AMA. Really great. Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye bye.